Well, I think we're about at 10 o'clock, so we'll get going. I appreciate everybody joining us once again here for our second try at the virtual class. Today we're doing summer perennials and talking a little bit about pollinators. I am Trevor Cameron, the general manager here. You probably recognize me from the classes in the store. Nicole Phillips is our director of marketing. She's in the background handling the chat. You want to say hi, Nicole?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
So we appreciate everybody joining. I'll start by saying hopefully everybody's still safe and well in these trying times. Hopefully we'll get back to your smiling faces down here at some point, but this will be a good way in between. You'll probably notice the background here is a little different than last week if you joined us. Instead of losing 5 pounds sweating in that greenhouse for an hour and a half, we came over to the yard next door. So Steve's hosting us in the backyard. We have some plants back here. If you're wondering what any of them are, certainly email. We can answer that as well after class. So, thank you again for joining us. I thought we'd start by talking a little bit about the importance of pollinators. I think everybody reads the news and knows the way the world is. There is nothing more important in our area and all areas of the world than pollinators. We don't have bees. We don't have pollination. We don't have fruit. We don't have vegetables. We don't have edibles. We certainly don't have flowers. So anything we can do to help the pollinators in our own garden is going to benefit your local climate. I think we're very proud at Sunnyside to tell you that we don't use any kind of harmful chemicals on our plants here. We specifically utilize growers like F&B Farms and Blooming Nursery, places that do not use neonics for spraying and things that will harm bees long term. So we're pretty proud to have an excellent selection of plants and perennials today that you can feel safe taking home, that have not been treated with chemicals and will bring some enjoyment to your garden and benefit the pollinators versus hurting anything. So certainly bees are a big part of it, but also think other things, butterflies, hummingbirds, a number of our small creatures help us pollinate our flowers so that we have them. Thought we could on the definition of a perennial. So we have perennials that come back year after year after year. We plant one in our garden and it's one of our little friends that comes back to say hello year after year after year if we have it in the right place. Annuals, we plant for one season. A lot of bloom, great for pollinators. We certainly won't talk you out of using annuals as well, but those are things that will not come back after frost. So long season of flower, but just one season. And there's a few things in the world that we would call biennials. If you think of maybe one flower around here that people know, foxglove, grows native in our woods. A lot of people buy cool cultivars of foxglove. Lasts for 2 years. So as long as we leave the flowers alone, it drops its seeds into the soil, then we're able to have foxgloves come back year after year, replenish themselves, and we never lose them because they are perennials. So just a quick little basic on that. One thing I did want to bring up in addition is kind of a new term in our industry that people are calling temperennial. So you can call it temperate perennial, temperate plant. I'll be honest. I think everybody knows that we're kind of in that zone 7. I feel comfortable with. Some folks say 8. Your temperennials are going to be things that are right on the hardy line. Many of us have them in our yards and they come back year after year after year. Usually if you've got good drainage, live close to the water, perhaps not have a difference, but maybe as an example, think of all the black and blue salvias, a very popular plant. I brought one in here. This is one of these temperennial salvias that's zone 7, zone 8. There's a lot of cultivars of these around. This is a great plant. I utilize them in pots. The hummingbirds absolutely love them. But maybe I'm signing up for something that I'm okay with if it doesn't perhaps come back year after year. It's a good flower power on a nice temperennial that we can utilize in our garden for a long season of bloom. It comes back great. If not so much. I know my mother has these down on her beach place and she gets more and more every year, but right on the water allows them to reseed, and then we've got that plant going forward. Okay. So just keep in mind, a lot of these plants are labeled properly here, and you will see that term on some of our grower tags now. It says temperennial, just to kind of let you know that something you want to maybe keep an eye on for winter hardiness. Okay. I thought we'd go through just a quick reminder, some basic planting techniques. You know, perennials are no different than shrubs or trees. We want to dig a nice hole. We want to amend the compost in there. Use transplant fertilizer, Sure Start, whatever your favorite organic remedy is, and get that in the soil so that we can establish a nice root system. The perennials, for the most part, need good drainage. You know, tomorrow we're going to be talking a little bit about drought tolerant, but that does not mean that we can walk away and these guys are dry forever. We want good drainage. We've got wet winters, dry summers. So some things today that we'll show you, some certainly will be covered tomorrow in the class as well, but a lot of these plants need to be watered as they're planted the first few seasons. So dig a nice hole, you know, amend the soil with about 1/3 compost, and you will have happy perennials going forward. You know, if I follow the typical, you know, life cycle of a perennial, if we go back to spring, you know, we kind of go dormant in the wintertime. So we're coming out of winter with not a whole lot of life. You know, a lot of times I have 2 young boys and I'm yelling at them in the winter, stop stepping on the crowns of my perennials because they're down the soil, you know, not as noticeable. And as we wake up in springtime and the growth comes up, you know, that's kind of the time that we get them going for that growing season. You know, I'll be honest, in my own garden, I have a rule. If I have to touch you twice a year, usually you are out. I break it with a few things, but perennials are certainly some of those things that we probably don't have to touch more than twice a year. If we go back to March, you know, I mulch my yard. I'm sure a lot of you do as well. I typically will scrape the mulch away from the crown, apply a really good granular fertilizer. You know, something like EB Stone, Rose and Flower Food. You know, I put a little, half a cup or a cup of that around a nice established perennial and take that compost or mulch and go right back over that food, and I'm all set to go. I want to make sure I've got no old growth left from last year and I start fresh again. You know, all of us in Western Washington know about Mr. Slug, you know, and he's out early and he is going to like to eat, excuse me, a lot of our perennial foliage. So what I like to do is notice those things in my yard that are coming back up in spring and get a natural slug bait down right away. You know, we specialize in Slugo. Iron phosphate's a great natural, pet safe, people safe, wildlife safe, doesn't hurt anything. Stay away from the metal aldehydes, the cories and the baits, and use something natural. If I put that down around my perennial come springtime, the slugs do not have a chance to get in there and start eating that to the ground week after week after week. We have a lot of people come in spring, you know, God, I see it come out of the ground and it's gone and it's gone. And that's typically always slug time. So as we go into summer, you know, I would always repeat my fertilizing. So typically I will go back, you know, mid-May to early June to mid-June. If you haven't, it's certainly not too late, and reapply another dose of that good granular fertilizer. Your other options would be to go to something more liquid. You know, we use a lot of Seagrow around here. This is the flower and bloom formula. It's something I can simply mix in my watering can and apply it to some of my perennials as we're in the summer months to keep them continually blooming. A lot of things I'll show you here in a minute. The reason I picked them for the class, and a lot I have in my own yard, is because they're things I can plant and enjoy bloom month after month after month, a lot of times all the way till frost without having to get a quick little flash for a month. I've got something that lasts for 3, 4, 5 months that way. So that's one option. If you want to stay kind of strictly organic in the garden, we've got some great liquid type fertilizers, Espoma Organics, a water soluble Bloom, if I want a little more flower. And I've also got a water soluble Grow. This works great for transplanting as well as just kind of general all-purpose plant health. So a couple of good options for some fertilizers. Now, when we get to the fall, you know, it's time to kind of touch them for the second time. We get in there and we clean our plants up in the fall. You know, I try to fight my own OCD tendencies between kind of neat and natural. You know, I like to look out in the garden in the winter and see not a whole lot of debris around and things cleaned up and I'm ready to go for spring. But you also do want to leave some leaves, some debris on there. It's good food for wildlife again. A lot of bugs hang out, and it'd be a place where hummingbirds get a little protein in the winter off your soil, but I don't want slugs. So I'm pretty careful on my own yard. I clean certain things up, leave other things alone. If you look at all the perennials we're looking at today, you know, I would kind of put them into 3 main categories, and I'll try to mention them as we go through each plant here in a minute. We've got ones that I would call stick perennials. So if you look in the Wintertime, maybe I've got some woody little old flower stalks and some sticks out of the ground that you will see that plant. We have other ones I would call mushers. You don't have to use a bad analogy, but think of the hosta. What does it kind of turn to in November? A big kind of slimy pile of snot, you know, frankly. And that's something I can scrape off the soil, put away for the winter, and I'm good to go there for springtime when it starts over again. And then the last one would be evergreen. You know, there's a lot of options for what we would call perennials still that keep their foliage during the winter. You know, think of your hellebores and heucheras, some great options around in the Northwest gardens where we can apply something that acts like a perennial, nice, small, and tidy, and then things that will come keep its foliage over the winter time, okay? With everything, you know, the right perennial to the right spot. You know, we'll have plenty of time for questions after the class. You can email us questions after we're done. We'll get them all answered. But if I want to have success with all plants, I want to pick the right plant and have it in the right spot. So certainly ask. It's a huge difference if I have dry, hot conditions, well-drained sandy soil versus an area I might have heavy clay, maybe a little bit more wet, certainly shade, some sun. You know, there's a lot of variables in our garden, but certainly picking the right plant with some help will give you success long-term. The last thing I'll mention, we'll show you some plants, would be clumping versus naturalizing. So if I'm picking perennials for my yard and all the ones that bloom in summer, there's great varieties that frankly will stay tidy. I want something that clumps, and maybe the clump gets a little bigger each year as it establishes, and I've got a more impressive plant. That's one way to go. Maybe a little tidier, you know, I can group things together in masses. You know, never plant one. I'd always tell you get 3 or 5, you know, and have a nice presentation. The other thing would be naturalizing, maybe running. I don't like to use the word invasive. It wouldn't be necessarily that, but I pick a perennial because I want it to start here and run into maybe a larger patch. Maybe you've got a nice border area, you'd like to naturalize something, fill up a little more square footage with a single plant. Those are ones that are maybe a little bit more aggressive. I can still control them very easily, but things that will eat up a little bit more space in my garden, okay? So if we kind of look at a few plants here, I brought way too many in here as usual, but we'll try to get through quite a few. I will start by saying this. I didn't bring everything over here that blooms in the summer. There's a lot of options. Certainly you may be asking about something that I didn't show. Certainly ask after or email us again. But I think I've got a lot of the good basics here that will give you a really nice, some really good options for just about everywhere in your yard. So if we start kind of with sun, I'll show you a few here as I duck in and out. So these are just starting to bloom. You can see the first little bit of purple, I think, budding out on that. These are asters. This is one called Kickin' Purple. And asters are just about ready to start kicking color, to be honest with you. I can pick any color in the rainbow, typically with aster, but something that will start now at about that midsummer point and bloom all the way into the fall. So asters are a very useful plant for a good sun. You've got lots of options for cultivars, different sizes, some foliage color. Certainly a plant worth considering for a mid to late summer bloom. One of the hummingbird favorites here, this guy's still blooming. He keeps going all summer. This is Phygelius, or we call Cape Fuchsia. This is another one that I would say naturalizes. If you have Phygelius, you'll probably smile about now and say, oh yeah, I got one of those, and now I've got a really nice sized patch of it going. So Phygelius is one that will take a little bit of room. We certainly can prune it back to keep it controlled and cut some sides off it to manage it somewhat. Again, lots of different color options, oranges, purples, pinks, reds, whites, yellows, just about everything. But you can see by the shape of that flower, that is an absolute hummingbird favorite, as well as all pollinators. This is a plant that's native to South Africa, but does very, very well up here in the Northwest Gardens. One of my favorites, because I kind of like some old school plants. So this is Black-Eyed Susan. I'm sure many of you have this in your yard. You can see that's a very tall one. You know, Goldstorm is one, like I mentioned, I have in my yard. You'll probably get up there in that 2 foot, sometimes even towards 3 foot tall every season. It is one that naturalizes into a nice patch. I typically go out late winter and cut some sides off mine and give them to gardening friends or the Arboretum plant sale. but that is a great plant for drought tolerance, really good summer color, kind of like a perennial sunflower almost. The Goldstorm is one that I would consider if you want just a little bit of height in the perennial border and something I don't have to really do much with at all. I just discovered this one, same foliage, you can see just about ready to start blooming. Maybe you want a little bit tamer type Rudbeckia. This is one called Little Gold Star. I've got a couple patches of this in my garden now, again, facing south, hot, dry sun, don't need a lot of water, but this is the opposite. Now I want something that's gonna stay under a foot tall, naturalize a little bit slower, and is a little bit more tame. So a lot of you that maybe have tried Rudbeckia in past years and thought, that's too much, I don't want that much Goldstorm, try some of the new cultivars. Little Gold Star is fabulous. This is a great little kind of miniature version of that same Rudbeckia. Plant we'll be mentioning tomorrow as well, but Russian sage. You know, this is indestructible. We can grow this all across eastern Washington. Super, super cold hardy, loves heat, doesn't need a lot of water, smells good. And you can see the kind of lavender to blue flowers are just starting to come out here for the season. This is one that will again bloom the majority of the summertime. There's a lot of good cultivars of this out. You can certainly find the larger growing species, but also quite a bit of smaller dwarf ones as well. My yard is just blooming right now. This is goldenrod or solidago. This is another great one for pollinators. I was out looking at my little butterfly garden this morning and the bees were just going crazy, and then the butterflies hopped in too. This is one that again will bloom nicely midsummer. Sometimes old goldenrods, they call these, got a little big. We had to stake them. You know, I try to follow one more rule in my perennials. If I have to stake you, I usually try to find a smaller version. I don't like to look out and see stakes on everything. So this is the variety I have, little goldenrod, a dwarf one that I can keep a little much more tidy, keep under 3 feet tall, and not have to tie it up every year with stakes. I brought a couple of salvias in. Salvia seems to be everybody's favorite plant these days. Right here we've got Little Kiss. Everybody's probably seen Hot Lips. There's a lot of these great kind of Texas type salvias that nurseries have been carrying. Some of our most popular plants here at Sunnyside. Again, I've had mine come back for years. I've got one called Radio Red, and there's a lot of varieties of salvias, but we're taking a chance a little bit in the winter with some of them. If we have good drainage, probably no problem. If we get a super cold winter, you may lose them, but it's an easy thing to replace, not super expensive, and this is a lot of flower power. The salvias will go starting in June all the way through frost. I don't have to deadhead them. They're great for the bees and all the pollinators again, but certainly a very, very easy plant to grow. So this I might put in that temperennial class a little bit. You'll see some of the varieties of these labeled as temperennials. But again, if I've got good sandy soil, good drainage, and a good hot spot in my yard, I typically will have most of the salvias come back. Traditional larger leaf salvias, this is May night, but a lot of our bigger leafed ones, again, very cold hardy. These are used a lot in the high mountain gardens in the Midwest, all over the place. Our place in Cleellum has some of these in the garden. Again, great summer bloom, great for the pollinators on the purple tones mainly, but a little bit different creature. This is one, as long as I had good drainage, I would never worry about winter temperatures on these. These will go down there in that 20 below zero to 30 below zero, and I hope we never get quite that cold here. A really nice small one, and we'll be talking about this tomorrow for drought tolerant. This is catmint or Nepota. There's a lot of good varieties of catmint out there, and these little guys are blooming machines. If you like the light blue, lavenders, even a little pink variety here and there, that is a great long season bloomer that kind of sprawls out into a nice mound, something I can use on my border for some good pollinator action and have a great little easy, low maintenance summer perennial. So take a look at some of the catmints. This is one called Little Titch, if you like that one. I'll kind of chuckle for a minute because back in the day, I didn't have as many perennials in my yard, and now I probably have as many as I do shrubs. And I kind of had a rule, if it had a common name with weed in it, you know, carpet weed, bugle weed, sneeze weed, any of that, was like, I don't know if I want to put that in my yard. It makes it sound like it might seed out and take over, but it's really not the case. This is one of my favorite summers. I've got 3 big clumps of this going in my front garden. Again, full sun. This is called sneezeweed, and this is a flower here that will last 3 months. So these bloom out, get beautiful color on them, all the hot summer colors, oranges, reds, yellows. There's combinations of all. Very nice striping and intricate if you can see the flowers. I don't have to water them much. They don't have to be staked. The difference now, probably in the last 10 years or so, is there's a lot of good shorter sneezeweeds. You usually were stuck with something up, you know, I'm 6'3", and I'd have a plant up chest level to eye level. It was a little big. Sometimes we had to stake them or get them back behind the border so they didn't flop over in summer wind or when we do get a little rain. A lot of these great new Mariachi Fuego, Mariachi Bandera. There's a great grouping of a lot of these new sneezeweeds that are very tidy. And again, a long season of bloom. This is one that'll go all the way into fall as well. Probably the crave the last couple years, especially when we talk about butterflies, is Asclepius, or we call milkweed. Now, I'm going to be honest, I think everybody looks around their yard and notices the beautiful creatures we have flying around. We have swallowtails. We've got all kinds of different good butterflies up here. We do not have monarchs. I think I might have seen one in my lifetime that probably got off course. They don't quite come up this far in our neck of the woods. Not to say they will at some point here, probably with global warming, but milkweed is their source, monarchs in particular, for nesting. You know, planting one of these, you know, I just don't want to mislead you and think, oh, well, I'll get monarchs in my yard. That's not the case. But this is a great blooming perennial anyway, for bees, for other pollinators, for our local butterflies. Just because they don't use it for nesting or food source doesn't mean it shouldn't be used. So Asclepius is a great long season perennial, blooms all summer, a lot of different colors and heights. Just be careful with this plant and really pay attention to your zones. If you look, a company like Blooming, I think, does a fabulous job with perennials. I look at that label, it's going to tell me everything I need to know on there, what kind of insects I attract, when I bloom, heights, all the typical things. But pay attention to the zone, especially with something like Asclepius. This is one that goes down to zone 3 or 4. I see a lot of Asclepius sold at nurseries that is zone 7, 8, and even 9. Those will probably be annuals up here, not something we would classify as perennial. So just make sure we have good sun, good well-drained soil, and we get the proper variety, and we've got a hardy Asclepius we can have in our garden, okay? This is another one of my favorites. It's even fun to say. You can say hyssop, right? Or Agastache, Agastache. This one's got quite a few different ways to say it. This is another one I love in my butterfly garden. It's got great fragrance, real herby smell. The flowers are awesome. I can get a lot of different colors. A lot of the newer ones, again, much shorter. I don't have to have a tall, 2-3 foot tall hyssop anymore. I can have something down there in that foot, 18-inch range. Long season of bloom. I don't have to deadhead these. I get good action with pollinators on them, and a lot of color options. If you can see on the camera here, I've got pink and orange and a couple tones in between going. That's one of my favorite attributes about these plants. You know, I can certainly find some that are one solid color, but as these stalks open season to season and week to week, I'm going to have multicolored different flowers going as they age and mature. So I think a really useful little perennial, great one for pollinizers. And again, as long as I've got good drainage and I've got good sunshine and I don't water a whole lot, that's a plant you'll have for years. That's a really easy one to grow. Lavender. Now, lavender is a plant I think everybody knows and everybody loves. You know, nothing like lavender. It smells good. I'm going to probably start sneezing here with it in front of my nose. But lavender is a great little perennial to utilize. The problem I see with gardeners and lavender is lack of pruning. I put this in full sun. I want well-drained soil. After they're bloomed, this bloom cycle's done, I want to take my hedge clippers and cut just below the bloom stalks into the foliage. Now I have squim. If you're local around here and you go to the Squim Lavender Festival, you see big old plants, 3-4 feet across that are a foot tall, look like big pin cushions, and they are covered in flowers. So use them, bring them into the house, use them for arrangements. You can dry them. There's a lot of uses for the flowers, but if you do not prune, you will get woody and woody and woody, and you will end up with woody lavender with that frosting of foliage. Won't kill the plant, but I think most people want a nice, dense, compact lavender. So lots of options for varieties. Typically up here, I would try to steer you towards more English and French varieties. I think they're much sturdier in the wet winters. Spanish lavender looks really cool. If you've got lavender and you see those two little rabbit ear flowers at the top of your stalks, that's typically a variety of Spanish. They're not quite as hardy. Again, that would be that zone 7, zone 8 neighborhood, and they're a little bit more moisture sensitive with our wet winters. So if you want a fail-safe lavender, go straight for good English varieties. You know, Hidcote, Munstead, there's a zillion good ones. This is one called 2 Times Blue. It's a little lighter, but we've got a great selection of different lavender varieties. Easy to grow. If we grab something like the Yarrows here, you've probably seen these growing. Yarrows are native over in Eastern Washington. And again, if I have a hot, sunny area, I don't water a lot, I want a pretty trouble-free perennial that I can plant and walk away, there's a lot of options of cultivars for different Yarrows. This is a great one, again, for the pollinators, specifically butterflies. You'll have some good action, yellows, oranges, pinks, reds. I mean, you can pretty much pick any color and you can find a really good Yarrow that will do your thing. I could have probably brought, I would guess right now we've got 20 varieties of coneflowers around. I brought a couple of them up to show, but coneflower, probably for a good summer perennial, is getting bred more than anything these days. I've got a lot of options for colors, for heights. Always a good clumping perennial. I've got a lot of different coneflowers in my yard, a lot of different colors, some short, some tall. Kind of depends on where you want to locate them in your perennial border. Some of the taller ones I can use as that second layer. A lot of the short ones, like this is Sombrero series, one called Adobe Orange. This is one that I can have right on the border. I'm only going to have, you know, less than a foot, nice little broad clump of foliage and repeat flowering as we go through the summertime. Excuse me. So I can pick, like, take Sombrero. You know, I use one called Hot Coral. I've got Adobe Orange. I've got Salsa Red. Got Flamenco. There's a whole bunch of varieties in that series that all would have the nice, tidy growth habit depending on what my color preference is. So again, try coneflowers are useful. Adobe's a nice short one. This is the new Evolution series. The difference probably with this one is by Monrovia. It's a great breed. Is I'm going to have a very nice green eye in the center, and this will probably give me 2, 3, 4, 5 different shades of pink, depending on the age of the flower. So kind of from that coral, the pastel pink, and everywhere in between. But that's another nice short little grower. If I was going to mention a couple others, like I said, I could have brought probably 20 up here. Kismet is a new series. You can find all the different colors in as well. That's a very easy one to grow. And then again, we carry, excuse me one second. We carry a lot of the old traditional ones out there as well. Magnus, you know, is our classic purple coneflower. White Swan's another really good tall one. We've got even some of the funky new light lime green ones, Green Envy. There's some really fun coneflowers around. Even double flowers, if you want to get a little risque. You know, like Supreme Cantaloupe. There's a whole bunch of double flowers, which kind of look a little strange because I don't think they're like that in nature, but certainly worth taking a look at as well. So again, coneflower, long season of flower. I try to deadhead mine just a little bit towards early midsummer as the first blooms come out, because that will keep them sending up continuous flowers, and we should have some sort of color almost all the way into fall till we have frost. So nice long season of bloom, and again, a plant that's tidy, clumping, and don't need to do a whole lot extra watering on. Okay. A couple more sun ones here. This is kind of a fun one. Little taste of the tropics. This is Banana Popsicle. I think we've still got Mango Popsicle out there and a few of the other ones, but these are our red hot pokers. So if I look at that plant, I've got a nice kind of clumpy grassy foliage. It's not the huge varieties that we used to be stuck with. These are a little tidier and smaller, but I've got a grassy clump of foliage and I've got continuous bloom stalks here over the summer. As long as I continue to deadhead those, that will extend my flowering through the majority of the summer as well. You can tell great color, and again, pollinators all over the place. Bees, hummingbirds, lots of creatures will like you for having a little red hot poker in your yard. Right? This is probably the last plant that I added into my own butterfly garden at home. This is called Gara or wandflower. I'm not a huge pink guy, I'm always to admit, but I do like this as a little darker pink. And also has got some nice foliage color. If you can see the splashing, a little bit of burgundy on the green, not super tall. This is one called Pink Fountain. We've got a lot of good varieties of Gara out there for sale. But again, this is the ultimate butterfly plant. They're gonna love that plant. The bees do as well. This is a great one again for sun. If I want a nice clumping perennial, depending on the variety, something that's gonna give me a little bit of height, you know, 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall or so, and repeat flowering stalks all summer long. This is one that will go one of the longer blooming seasons as well. Okay, so take a look at the Garas. And I kind of saved a fun one for last. I don't know who does blanket flower. You can tell I like the orange, the red, the yellow. But if you've seen this plant, lots of options out there now for growing. This is a native down into some of the Arizona areas, high desert. Does very well here as long as we have drainage. These are some of the first perennials I put around my butterfly garden, and I use this almost like ground cover along the border. If I just want a short, you know, ever blooming perennial, honestly, these go all the way into November in my house, then I want to plant some different blanket flowers. It'll start as a clump, and then what we'll do is we'll reseed and we'll make a nice patch. I've got a couple pretty good patches of this going in different areas, but again, good drainage and maximum sun. I brought this one up in particular because you can see flowers coming out. I've got buds everywhere, but you can see this one right here. It kind of feels fun. They're nice and soft and fuzzy, but that's a seed head from the flower that just finished. So if you want my trick with blanket flower, I brought my pruners here, is this time of year, I'm doing a little bit of deadheading. So maybe every 2-3 weeks, I'll walk along the blanket flower patch and spend just 5 minutes clipping some old seeds heads out of there, because I don't want it to go to seed yet. I want to keep buds coming all season long. When we get to late summer, now I walk away because I want those seeds to start to mature and dry on there. The birds will be grabbing them for a little foraging in the winter, and those will start to drop after frost, and now I'll have new plants that come up and increase my patch season to season to season. So blanket flower, some great varieties. Again, all those hot summer colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows, and every combination in between, but certainly something nice and short. If you've got a hot little border you'd like to edge with a good perennial, this might be something to think about as well, okay? I just want to mention just a couple, we talked about at the beginning, you know, that was all sun. We talked about a couple of evergreen options if I wanted something year round. I'm going to step out here and grab 3 of them. So the first one here has nothing to do with summer flower, but this is Hellebore, and I try to bring these up in most of the perennial classes because we would call it I have the 3H addiction, I call it, Heucheras, Hostas, and Hellebores. Hellebores is a plant that blooms in winter, but I've got really nice foliage all season and something that will give me some presence, even when it's not blooming. That's still lovely in the shade garden or part shade, mixed with other things that are blooming around. I've got great foliage on it, and I've always got that next winter to look out for a little bit of flower power. I am probably the poster child around here for the contagious disease we call Heuchera Itis. You got to remember to say that, because if you have Heucheras, you probably caught it from me. Heuchera Itis is one that you can get addicted to these plants pretty quick. I use Heucheras all over my landscape containers, border plants, year-round color. These are plants that will not go dormant in the winter and will give me pops of foliage color. The other benefit with Heuchera, it doesn't look like much and you wouldn't think so, but we get continuous flower stalks. You know, this is one called Georgia Peach. Got great foliage. I can use this in sun, I can use it in shade for a little pop of foliage color, but I continue to get these flower stalks all summer long and through the fall. This is a hummingbird favorite. You know, the bees will visit you, and you will also have a little hummingbird action particularly on the brighter colored flowers that come out of some of the cultivars. That's one variety. This is a really cool model, the one called Green Spice. I can grow this almost anywhere too. I choose to use it more in shade. I've got quite a few clumps of this back behind in one of my shade gardens, almost like a ground cover. You know, I've got great foliage year round, little silver, some green, a little touch of purple, really brightens up the shade area, and something I don't have to spend a lot of time maintaining. Then we've got a lot of purples all the way to blacks. Which one did I pick here? This is Spellbound, but there's a lot of other ones look like this. Berry Marmalade, we've got Obsidian out there. Heuchera is a plant that you could almost draw a rainbow from green, white, all the way to purple, black, and you could find a Heuchera foliage color, whatever your desire is in between. So lots and lots of options, okay? So we'll do just a few shade perennials here for summer, and then we'll get to some questions here in just a minute. So we'll show you a couple. If I was going for flower power in the shade or part shade, I don't think there's anything better than hardy fuchsia. Most people think of annual fuchsia, our baskets, certainly a good annual we can plant in shade, but hardy fuchsias are very, very easy to grow up here. I've got a number of them in my yard. We use them here in our landscape. They're great in pots, they're great in the ground, and I can pick a lot of colors like I can with annual fuchsias, but we just have to be kind of careful which variety we choose. I would always try to look at my tag and stick with something that says zone 7. There's quite a bit of zone 8 hardy fuchsias. Again, if you're down by the water really close, you're probably fine with something like that. If I'm up in the hills a little bit, probably going to need to get something in the zone 7. There's even some zone 6. You know, these will go dormant in the winter. They're just going to be sticks of dead looking wood, and do not cut them back. My trick with fuchsia is I would leave them alone over the winter, and then I'd be walking out the next spring in late, mid-March, early April. When I start to see the green come out all over the woody stem, now I can control the height and cut down to those points where I have foliage starting, and then off we go for the season. I have a Golden Gate, kind of a limey yellow foliage one with similar flower color than that. I just put in a big pot in my new shade garden I made last year. And it's got a lot of wood, and it is giant this year. It's just beautiful, about 3 feet by 3 feet. And that's only after 2 years in a container. So these are plants you can get a lot of different heights on, a lot of different flower colors, and something, again, great pollinators. And that is the perfect plant for a hummingbird buzzing through your shade garden. So take a look at hardy fuchsias. Just so we're on the same page, that one is called Army Nurse, you know, kind of with that rosy corolla, the purple sepals. This is one called Queen Ester, if you like a little brighter. That's got the white corolla with a little bit more of that fuchsia purple type sepals in it. But you can really pick just about any combination of colors, and you can find a really good hardy fuchsia that'll treat you right. I always mention, I mentioned the 3H addiction. I don't know how many hostas I have, but it's far too many. Hostas are a really useful perennial up here that we'll talk about on tomorrow. Again, they're very drought tolerant. Most people see those big luscious leaves and think, oh, I'm gonna have to water it all the time. It's the exact opposite. Hosta doesn't need a whole lot of water once it's established. You can see, I picked this one. I just had my flower stalk dry, smelled a little bit. A lot of hostas have like fragrance, lavendery flower, and what's coming up right here? Here comes another one. So these are plants will get nice foliage on, you know, spring, summer, fall. They do go dormant in the winter. You know, you kind of scrape the slime off when they go dormant and start them over. But I can pick blues, whites, yellows, different size leaves, different textures. There's a lot of options out there for hosta. I like the fact you're at Sunnyside. We go back 30 years every season, and we literally try to carry the hosta of the year that was named by the Hosta Association for you to come down here and purchase, and we would have stock of all 30 years, the last going of new hostas. So great variety down here. Right now, we're a little light. It's been a busy year, but this is something, if you're down here, you know, that late April, May, early June, you would probably, again, have 30, 35 different varieties of hostas to choose from here at Sunnyside. This one's always fun to say, anemone, anemone, anemone. You can probably say it too many times. Anemones, you can see the first flower bud just coming out here. This is a plant that I would use the word naturalize. This is one if I planted an enemy in my shade garden or part shade, they do like some water, you know, kind of that woodland garden, and they will reseed themselves. So if you've had an enemy, you're probably smiling, yes, I bought one, now I have 12. So it may not be for everybody, but it's a great filler plant. You know, if you've got shady areas or part shade, you're looking for something in the background, there's very tall ones that you will get awesome flower power, you know, starting now all the way through the fall. Other new ones like this, a little bit shorter. We don't have to necessarily have a 2-3 foot anemone anymore. We can have something a little tidier, a little compact that'll give us the flower we want in the mid-late summer, fall for our shade garden. So again, not all day sun, half day sun, or shade is a great spot for some of the anemones. I think this is a cute little plant. This is a variety of Saxophrage Mr. Hinckley found, Monrovia. You can see on the logo puts this out. I have some of these in my garden. This is one called Berry Bright. We also carry one called Pink Elf. If you can see the colors, it's got great foliage color, you know, kind of underneath. I get a little different angle on top. This is one I've had in my garden now for a number of years, just a small little tight clumping perennial on the border in the shade. And this is all about late summer. So when this starts blooming, I'll get either a dark rose or a light pink on the other one. Flowers start popping up here, usually in September, October, November. So if I want something late summer, fall, it's got really nice foliage all season, and then I get a little pop of color there late in the season. Some of these new saxifrages are awesome to throw in if you've got a little shady or a little woodland garden. Just a couple more. This is Beesia. You can see he's blooming right now. Some people call this Evergreen Marshmallow. It's got a bunch of different names, but Beesia is a great deep shade plant. So if I have shade and I'm looking at something that will naturalize slowly and clump a little bit both, this is something I can introduce to my garden that will give me some foliage year round, nice white flower stalk during the growing season, but something I can utilize in mass, you know, keep the weeds down, fill up some area, and really have a nice attractive little short clumping perennial. So Beesia would be something to consider here for that summer, fall as well. If the camera was a little different, you could see Steve's in his garden here. Mine is at about 5 feet tall this year, but you can see how big. This is a gallon plant. Okay, that's still probably a good 2 feet by 2 feet this year. This is Aurelia, which I just love. It does bloom late summer. It gets a cool little kind of metallic purple berry on it, but I'd buy this for the foliage. I use this back up underneath a shady rhododendron in my yard. It's amazing how much it grows in a year. It is nothing coming out of winter, no wood, no structure. You see it wake up in April or in March and it just never stops. Mine will probably reach 5 feet by 5 feet this season, and I have had my plant maybe 7 or 8 years now. So we call this Sun King, yeah, or some people call it Gotemba Aurelia. This is a sweet shade plant. You got to, you know, again, part shade to full shade, maybe a little bit of morning sun will get you more yellow color to it. If it's in dark, deep shade, it'll be a nice lime. But I'm sure you can think of your yard and you've got that spot where, man, I'd like to have something kind of in that background, that second layer in my garden that I can put some smaller perennials or shrubs in front of that's going to pop the color. So that's a great background that I've used in my yard as well. Steve's got a couple beautiful clumps. You're welcome to come down and look at the nursery here as well sometime. So that's Aurelia. And I think I'll just, because I put a couple things behind me that you probably couldn't even see. So I'm going to show you just a couple more and then we'll take some questions. So one more thing I brought out just to kind of touch on sun one more time is Coreopsis. Now I've got a couple different varieties of these in my own garden in different areas. Again, long season of bloom. You can see this is a little different foliage. They call this threadleaf Coreopsis or tick seed. I've got yellows, reds, oranges. You can even get pinks now, whites, a lot of different options. This is a great one for re-blooming all season. They'll tell you on the tags, ones that maybe are a little bit shorter season, one that are longer. But if you just deadhead these just a little bit towards that early summer, we'll tell that plant not to go to seed. And then we will continue to produce buds through the whole summer into fall. So a lot of the tick seeds offer you, again, great drought tolerance, great for sun. nice and low, use them on the borders. I think a lot of people see these and even think the word annual, because that's a lot of flower power on a pretty tidy little perennial that we can use to help out the bees in our yard as well. These are the larger flowered ones. You can see a little different foliage on that. But again, long season of bloom. I have a clump of this in my own butterfly garden. And again, just a little bit of deadheading. As these flowers are spent, I can lightly clip these stalks out of here, and I will continue to send buds up the entire summer and all the way into that fall time as well. Okay. And last one here, we had to bring up a perennial geranium. You know, that's kind of a bluish color. We can get these in blues and whites, lavenders, different tones. You know, I think perennial geraniums are pretty useful for a lot of border plants. We see a lot of these used to fill up some area. They spread, naturalize very well, but something that's not crazy invasive. You know, it's very easy to clip back geranium and again, start over every season anew. So lots of options if you want to come take a peek. This is Johnson's Blue, I believe. Actually, that's Roseanne, or if you're a police fan, we call it Roxanne around here. But Johnson's Blue, Roseanne, there's a lot of different flavors of the hardy geraniums that would be very useful. And again, sun all the way to, you know, part shade. These are pretty useful little plants we can put back in some shade too and still get a lot of flower power out of through the summer and the fall, but not have to have necessarily all day sun as well, okay? So that's a lot of perennials. We got information overload, Nicole.
No, it's good. People were asking about Astilbes.
Okay. You know, I should have brought Astilbe in. There's no reason I don't. I've got some in my yard. It just doesn't repeat bloom maybe as much. We've got quite a few here, and there's some that are still blooming. I know mine in my yard are still as well. But that would be one that we would need a little bit more moisture on regularly. And I'd look at some of the new Astilbes. Steve's got some in his yard as well as me. We've got some great foliage ones now. I've got one called Amber Moon that's just a beautiful yellow foliage. It's blooming light pink right now. Chocolate Shogun, you know, one of the hardest foliages to get into the shade is that dark, you know, blackish purple color. And Chocolate Shogun is just super dark leaf with a nice flower as well. Those are just starting to bloom in my own yard. But we certainly have them. I don't mean to pick on Astilbe. We've got pinks, we've got whites, we've got reds, all the typical colors you would like here for sale at the nursery.
When you start deadheading, is it better to use clippers? Is it okay to use your fingers? And does deadheading help the bloom bloom longer?
Yeah, deadheading always works to help you get more bud and bloom, especially early in the season. All plants want to go to seed. You know, like every living creature on earth, we want to reproduce ourselves. So if I leave flowers on there to dry, that's the first thing I'm going to do is try to reproduce seed to reproduce myself for the next season. If we deadhead in the season early, especially, we'll keep that continual bloom going through. You know, not to say I don't use my regular bypass pruners. I thought I would never buy a little pair of snips, a little small pair. Much easier to get into perennials and annuals, doing some fine tuning. I don't have a problem with pinching back. You know, we talk about that at the pruning class every year. If you can get in there and pinch it very carefully, I would say with some things be real careful, because you think you might have pinched the bloom and then you go to pull it and you just pulled a chunk of that perennial off the crown too. So snips, a small pair of little compact shears. We carry a couple different things in the store that would work very well as well.
Talking about pruning, how do you help prevent heucheras from getting too leggy?
Well, if you want my rule on heucheras, because I will never get rid of my collection and I have way too many, I go through those twice a year. So here in about a month, we'll get to late August, early September. I will literally go through and dig out all the old leaves, clip them back to just the clumps of fresh foliage at the tips of the crowns, and let that flush out in the fall so that I have a really nice looking foliage all through the winter. When we get to spring, that's when I would look at dividing, and heucheras a lot of times up here get a little bit of what I would call frost heave. You know, we plant them in the soil, a year, 2 years, 3 years go by, and as that soil compacts, that crown comes out, and then we end up getting that kind of woody curve to it with the foliage out here. It's not the end of the world. I could literally take a shovel, the clumps come up very easily, and I could rebury it lower if you want to do it that way. I run a 3-year cycle in my yard, so I've kind of got different varieties I do each year, but I do dig every clump up of, like this year is berry marmalade year, I can tell you right now. They're out of the ground a little bit more coming next spring. I will dig those clumps up, divide them, rebury them in, and I'm good for a few more years that way. And I think you would be shocked on one clump of heucheras. I think last year was obsidian. I bet you I had 80 plants besides what I put back into the ground. So very easy to get little divisions to move around your yard, share with gardening friends, you know, donate them to a local plant sale. There's a lot of options, but I would always clean them up going into winter. So I've got fresh foliage. I would look at them coming out of winter. Do I need to divide them, replant them, and then off we go for the season.
What about lavenders? What if they become too woody? How do you take care of pruning them and get them to come back in full force?
Well, lavender, that's a great question because it's a common one we get here at the nursery too. But lavender is a plant, if you have not pruned it, again, you've got the wood, and you've got that little frosting of foliage, and then my flowers on top. You're going to take a chance by doing this. I'm not going to lie to you. I would wait till coming out of winter, and I would take that lavender down into the wood. You know, put some food on it, keep your fingers, your toes crossed, and hopefully it comes back out. Typically, they do rebud off the wood, and you'll have your little compact plant left. But I try to tell people now, as you buy them, or maybe it doesn't come back, you know, don't feel like you can't grow lavender. Now that you've kind of learned that lesson, let's replace it with the same variety even, and just get out there at least once a year, maybe even twice. It'll only take you a second and just lightly clip back in between flowers. I'll keep the flower cycles going much quicker. I'll get more color out of it, and I will keep my plant dense and compact.
When's the best time to prune all of these perennials we're talking about, and even, you know, divide or move them?
Always division and transplanting is always going to happen over the winter. So once we get a good hard frost in the fall, you know, I'd say people the holidays. Who knows when that is up here anymore? But typically, you know, Thanksgiving time, and most perennials I've got up till about the 1st of March. So I'll tell you a slick tool here for perennials. We carry a couple special shovels that are just awesome for dividing clumps of perennials very easily. Hori knife works very well, but I can take anything, you know, take an old clump of hosta. I divide mine every few years and give them away again, or move them into the areas of the yard. Very easy to cleave it into quarters. As long as I have a piece of that crown that I can transplant, I've got a successful time. It'll always be good in the winter. If we do it in the growing season, you know, not going to have as much luck as far as things taking, but as long as we do it while they're dormant, very easy to divide and move perennials around. I would always, like the other half of that question was, you know, kind of when to prune and cut them back. You know, let Mother Nature tell you that. You know, who knows what the weather's going to do. Sometimes we get these Indian summers and it's beautiful all the way through October. Everything still looks great. Other years we get a little wet, you know, a little cold early. They might go dormant a little bit early too. So watch the weather. You know, once we get a couple good hard frosts or two, they'll let you know they're kind of shriveling down and going dormant for the year. Once they go, you know, brown, yellow, whatever color, then we can clip off that growth, clean them up if we want to, or leave it there, debris there for the winter, and then just make sure we clean it up coming out of winter before they start over again.
Can you go back to your term of temperennials and kind of explain that again, and maybe give some good examples of those types of plants?
Well, there's some, you know, and again, you know, as a gardener, not just running this place, there's some really cool temperennials, and I will always go by a black and blue salvia. You know, that's an easy example. I think a lot of people have tried. It blooms like crazy. The hummingbirds love it. I will never not get one. I grow it in a big pot right where I park my truck in my driveway. It's beautiful to come home and see the hummingbird on it. Every morning he's on it. But it's a zone 8 plant. You know, if it came back, and it has a couple times, you know, over the years, great. I got my plant back. If it doesn't, I don't mind going down to the nursery here, you know, and spending $12, $15 for a plant that I'm going to get superior flower power out for the whole year. So salvia is one example. You know, a couple others. There's a plant we call digiplexus. It's basically South American foxglove, spectacular flower. I've grown that a few times in my yard, but I'm buying it kind of as an annual or a temperennial. If it came back, great. If it doesn't, I'm okay with that, and I would replace it coming out that next year. The term temperennial, you know, probably is a little hard to make a strict definition, but if you think of us, you know, if you jumped online right now and said, I live in Marysville, what is my plant zone? They're probably going to tell you zone 8, you know, and zone 8 is down there in that 10 to 20 degree range. So I don't know about you, but there is a few days every winter that we get down into the teens, you know, in a typical winter. You know, some of those plants are not going to come back, you know, if we get that cold. So zone 7 to me is a little safer, and certainly 6, 5, 4 all the way down. The big part of our area with the temperennial is, you know, part of it's the temperature you should consider, but I think a huge part of it is wet. You know, I don't need to remind anybody in Western Washington, we're all green around here because we have regular rain, especially through that fall, winter, early spring period. If I've got heavy clay and I've got drainage issues, or I don't have, you know, a good soil, a lot of those plants will just rot out. It's not necessarily the temperature that might get them in. It would be just too wet. So watch your drainage. You know, I choose to do my salvia in a pot. You know, some years I've taken the pot and just tucked it up underneath one of the big E's in my house in Everett so that it stays dry, and it has come back. Other years I'm like, yeah, I want to put some bulbs in there and try something different for early spring, and then go back to the salvia come summertime. So just watch that name. There's a really good grower, local here in Washington over in Redmond, called Tissues and Liners, or T&L, and their tags are very descriptive. I see a number of things come in that we sell from them that say temperennial right on there. Okay, let me see what zone that is. If it's 7, I'd feel pretty comfortable. If it's 8, if it comes back, great. If it doesn't, you know, I'm okay with that. I'll replace it or try something different the next year.
Excellent. What about, people are asking about echinaceas, that they do well for, you know, maybe 2 or 3 years, and then they have a hard time getting them to come back the way that they used to, or, you know, how to just keep them looking great all the time, every year.
I will join that conversation this year, because I'll tell you, I probably have, what, 6, 8, I probably got 9 clumps of one of the first sombreros to come out called Hot Coral. I love the color. It's nice and short. All of mine look great except for the first 3 I put in probably 8 or 9 years ago now. They are very scrawny this year, a little sparse. I'm not getting a lot of flower. I've already dug down next to there, and as a gardener, I did not get them good enough drainage. And I would say if you are struggling with coneflower, or frankly, a lot of these summer sun perennials, you have to have good drainage. And our problem is around here is clay. You know, I live in Glacier View in Everett. They should call Glacial Till neighborhood. I dig and I add compost and everything I've talked about, but that is a particular area I know in my own yard that I have not gone down far enough. So if I'm a plant, I grow, I root, I develop, I get bigger. You know, these guys want to have deep root systems. All these drought tolerant plants want to go down in the soil to stay happy over the summer. If I get down to that point and I am laying on hard pan, you know, 1 foot down in the soil, that wet over the winter is, I think, why you're probably having a few people say theirs are declining. Maybe don't give up. If they haven't come back, yes, let's replace them. I can tell you what I'll do in my yard. This one particular patch of hot corals, excuse me, when we get to the dormant season here, I'll be digging those clumps off, setting them off to the side, and I am going to go to town with a digging bar and a bale of compost, and I'm going to get that clay broken up some more, get some compost in there so that I make sure that water goes away in the wintertime.
What about, are there any deer-resistant plants that are also good pollinator-friendly plants?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I will apologize because I try to memorize a lot of things, but I do not memorize the deer list. But if you come down here and I look at any of our tags, I showed you blooming before, beautiful information on there. You are going to see a little picture of Mr. Buck with the antlers with a little line and a circle around it. It says, no, deer do not browse this plant. There is plenty of options for things that deer will not get at. I would recommend you go online. That's what I typically do with customers. Go to a place like Great Plant Picks. There's a lot of good Northwest information. Make sure you type in your Google Seattle, Pacific Northwest, Western Washington, so you don't get a bunch of stuff from Iowa in there. But we'd want to get a list, and it'll tell you things that they will avoid and certainly things that they hardly ever touch, and that should give you a pretty good list to start.
Excellent. What about yarrow? Are they invasive around here?
No, yarrow, again, our family's lucky enough. We got a place in Cleellum, and it's the opposite climate over here. And yes, yarrow over there with the chalky soil, lack of summer rain tends to naturalize a little bit more, but I wouldn't call it invasive. Typically over here, if I've got good drainage, I'm going to have a clumping type perennial that, yes, I will get bigger clumps and it'll move a little bit, but I would not consider that one invasive, no. Sorry, I got a bee here buzzing on me. He's coming
That's
for
perfect.
the Salvia.
That was one of the next questions that we have some people with hummingbird feeders, and they notice that the hummingbirds are in their yards, but it seems that maybe the bees are too close to the hummingbird feeder. They wonder if they have any impact on each other, hummingbirds and bees.
No, not so much. I mean, they'll both like, similar things, but the hummingbird's going for the nectar. Bee certainly is as well, but he's going more for the flower, the pollen. Neither of them will hurt each other. If you're like me, the hummingbirds are pretty territorial. I got one that took over the backyard, another one that takes over the front yard, and he doesn't let anybody else come in. But no, you won't have any kind of interaction between the two of them. I'll just speak for me. I've done the sugar feeders. I've tried all that. I couldn't stand the amount of ants that would come up, with the sugar. It would spill on the poor patio, on and on and on. If you're doing it, great. I'm not telling you to get away from it. But I would utilize that more over the winter months, maybe to keep them around and try to get some of these perennials in your yard. There's so many things that hummingbirds will enjoy, not just perennials, but a wide range of shrubs that you could have blooming at almost every month of the year, even the dead of winter, that would keep them happy with a little bit of nectar. So lots of options.
Can you talk about maybe some fall maintenance with some of these perennials? Specifically, somebody's asking about a juga, creeping bramble, and sedums. Should they be cut back hard in the fall?
They all can be cut back hard. I think that would probably be up to you as a gardener. Again, I wouldn't think about doing it until we get to that first hard frost. And then it's like, okay, am I going to divide something, move something? I mean, there's a lot of options you have as gardeners, but certainly it doesn't mean you have to do it. Yes, I go through and cut all the little trailers off my sedums. I want to get back to that nice tidy clump. That's kind of OCD me in my own garden. Doesn't mean you have to be. If you don't do it in the fall, I try to get most of that done so that I don't maybe go back in March when I'm busy here with my job thinking I got to get all this done. Hopefully some of it I can get accomplished in the fall. It's not going to hurt the plant one way or another.
Excellent. What about slug? You talked a little bit in the beginning about some slug control, and the crust oyster shells, are those good for slug control, or what are some safe treatments?
Well, the best safe way is, because again, it's been years since I sold metal aldehyde. That stuff is just nasty. The baits, the poisons, the gels. Iron phosphate is Slugo, and that is not going to hurt anything. That would always be my first choice. I don't mind the oyster shell. I think what you might mean is diatomaceous earth. We started carrying that as well, and that's another product that is all natural, pet, people, anything safe. It's not going to hurt anything. The key with slugs, I always, like I mentioned before, is get them early. Do not let them get established. If you leave a lot of those debris maybe around susceptible plants, that's where I'm going to hang out in the winter as a slug, get my eggs going, and boom, now I've got 20 times more come the next spring. So cleaning up, certainly key areas, even if you cleaned around the crowns of your plants, and then we walk out there, 1st of March, as things are starting to break bud, or right before they do, and get those rims of iron phosphate, of diatomaceous earth, whatever it is. Don't let them get in there to start with. I'm able to leave a lot of my dahlias in the ground because I've got great drainage, but that's the one thing I always am out there way before I even see green on them, and I am getting a rim of iron phosphate, because if I don't, the slugs that are in the yard will tend to eat those faster than they can come out of the ground. So lots of options for safe. I would challenge you never to use aldehyde again, and use something like Slugo. Brand new this year is Slugo Max, they call it, and it's no different. It's a little bit more expensive, but then you read the label and it's triple the attractant is the only difference. So if I buy Slugo Max, a little small 2-pound jar will do like 10,000 square feet. I mean, you would not need very much, but lots of options for that. Iron phosphate, or the oyster shell lime, crushed oyster shell, slash the diatomaceous earth.
What about fertilizers? What kind of numbers composition do you want to look for in a fertilizer for these perennials?
Well, we don't need a lot. I'm not going to sit here on the soapbox and talk you out of Miracle Grow, or I call it liquid crack for the plants, on and on and on. You can certainly do what's been working for you, but I would always rather feed the soil. So I showed at the beginning, something from EB Stone, that's 563 is the numbers. That's a great perennial food. Use it on my roses as well, but that's got alfalfa meal, microbes, all kinds of the goodies in there to feed my soil as well as my plant. I don't need, triple 10, triple 20, perennials don't need that. I'd rather have you use something a little more gentle and organic to help the soil out. So, rose and flower I brought out. That's a great all-purpose one. We carry a product called Ultra Bloom. Maybe I've had real happy green lush perennials, but I'm not getting a lot of flower power out of them. Maybe I go for an organic phosphorus and use Ultra Bloom. Same company, EB Stone. I could add some of that's what I do in my annual pots. Dahlias get that in my yard, because not only do I want healthy leaves, a good balanced food, but I really want to kick in a little extra phosphorus for more flower. So Ultra Bloom may be the other way. The other two things I showed were organic from a spoma. If I didn't want to deal with granular and I just had a watering can, this mixes it for you in the cap. You unscrew it, dump it in, fill it full of water, walk around, water your plant once. I mean, that's a very easy way to do kind of a foliar / soil feed that maybe I go and do that like once a month, during the growing season to keep things really blooming nicely.
Excellent. I think we covered a lot of questions. If we didn't get to yours today, don't be afraid to reach out to us. Send us an email. We'd be happy to continue the conversation with you personally. The one thing we haven't talked about yet is that we are offering a discount attached to this class. We're going to be offering 20% off all perennials from today all the way until next Friday, the 7th. So come by the nursery, check out some of the things he's talked about in person, and don't forget to mention when you're at the register that you were part of this class and get that discount. We really appreciate you all joining us. Again, if there's anything that you'd like that we didn't talk about, feel free to reach out to us.
See you again. If you're up for it tomorrow, we got drought tolerant at 11 a.m. on Sunday. Yeah, stay safe, everybody.